Hello everyone, my name is Natalie Turvey. I'm President and Executive Director of the Canadian Journalism Foundation. It is fall, and that means we are kicking off a new season of CJF J Talks. I am so excited to welcome you to our timely season opener, Pivot to Video 2.0, direct to platform news creators. Our thanks to TD Bank Group, our exclusive J Talk series sponsor, for making another season of important conversations possible. Our gratitude also extends to our in-kind supporter Cision and to CPAC, our broadcast partner for these events. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Toronto, which is situated on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and we are privileged to work and gather in these territories. The discussion today will run for an hour, and please feel free to jump in with your questions at any time using the tab on your screen. If you're interested in more conversations like this and you're in Toronto, join us later this month at the Isabel Bader Theatre for Diversity at the Crossroads, Protecting Inclusive Journalism in Canada. Along with our partners at Informed Perspectives, we're bringing together leading journalists for a timely talk. We'll explore why preserving diverse perspectives in journalism matters, not just for creating more inclusive newsrooms, but because our audiences should see themselves reflected in the media they consume. And that's important for a healthy democracy. We find ourselves in another revolutionary moment for journalism. Audiences are fundamentally changing how they consume news, and many are gravitating towards content creators over traditional media. The latest Reuters Digital News report shows us the scale of this shift. For the first time, social media has overtaken TV as Americans' top news source, with TikTok becoming the fastest growing news source globally. But this isn't just about platforms, is it? It's about relationships. Direct-to-platform creators are building connections with their audiences that traditional media structures often can't match. While overall trust in news in Canada has plateaued at 40%, trust on video platforms like YouTube is actually growing. The numbers also show a stark generational divide. No surprise, 44% of 18 to 24-year-olds say social media is their main news source, compared to just 20% of those 55 plus. These trends raise fascinating questions that our panel will explore today. How are creator journalists redefining trust and credibility through these direct connections? What happens to editorial standards when creators bypass traditional newsroom oversight? What opportunities and risks come with algorithm-driven distribution? And where is all of this taking us? Well, I am thrilled to introduce you to some remarkable media innovators. Johnny Harris is an Emmy Award-winning independent journalist and filmmaker based in Washington, D.C. He first gained recognition for his series Borders on Vox. His long-form documentary-style YouTube videos reporting on interesting trends and stories both at home and around the globe help millions of viewers better understand the news and the world. We're delighted to welcome Sophia Smith-Gaylor back to the CJFJ Talks platform from her base in London. Sophia last joined us in 2022 for a discussion on how TikTok is helping newsrooms reach audiences. She's a leading voice in digital journalism and a pioneer in vertical reporting, with hundreds of millions of views on her videos. From here in Toronto, Stephanie Wilson-Chapin is the Strategic Partner Manager, News, Sports and TV for YouTube Canada, where she leads partner engagement and revenue and content strategy for news partners. And I know Stephanie will have some valuable insights for us today. Guiding our discussion, our moderator is no stranger to Canadian audiences. Ginella Massa is an award-winning journalist, broadcaster, and media consultant, and a popular social media personality in her own right. I couldn't be more honored and excited to have this lineup with us today. Ginella, over to you.
Thanks so much, Natalie, and thanks so much to CJF for inviting me to moderate this important conversation. And good morning to everyone who's joining us. Welcome to Pivot to Video 2.0, direct to platform news creators. And as you heard there, we're exploring how video first creators are reshaping journalism, reaching audiences directly on platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And we know that audiences are increasingly looking to individuals, not just to mainstream outlets for news, context, and connection. So our panel today is bringing their expertise from across this evolving space and in building independent media brands, mastering algorithms, and supporting publishers at scale. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation and to learn more about this realm that, I've only just dabbled in a little bit, but haven't taken on a head on. And I know a lot of people are interested to do what you folks are doing. I want to start maybe with Johnny and Sophia as well. You both have worked in mainstream newsrooms and pivoted into sort of independent journalism. And I could say, Johnny, I'll ask you to start. You're a bit of a pioneer in that sense, and in some of the work that you've been doing. Folks, I think, sometimes want to divide. You're either a journalist who works for a mainstream outlet, or you're a creator, or you're an entrepreneur. How do you see yourself? How do you define yourself in that space? And is there overlap, or is it all of the above?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that's constantly in flux. I think for me, I've always seen journalism not as a title, but more as an act, more as a an effort to go out and capture and record and process factual information from the world, and then attempt to communicate that to a large audience in a good faith, responsible way. And that to me does not happen under specific institutions or outlets. It doesn't have to happen under specific institutions or outlets. It can happen sort of anywhere. And I think there's actually a really special place for individuals who do the act of journalism in an environment where they can follow a personal, authentic sense of curiosity, a personal, authentic sense of communication. And in this world that we're living in, audiences tend to look for journalism being done in that sort of more personal, authentic space. There's problems and pitfalls with that, but it's still journalism. So I didn't study journalism. I kind of accidented my way into it. But for me, it was always about curiosity and a commitment to truth and a commitment to telling that truth to a large audience. And that's
Mhm.
journalism to me.
Sophia, what about you? How do you see yourself in this space?
I think something that we're seeing is, or at least that I'm feeling, is when I'm invited, especially in the journalism innovation work I do, when I'm invited back to newsrooms, I'm invited back to, yeah, the more traditional old school places, seeing how I'm defined and then selecting how I wish to be defined. And in theory, I'm a journalist. There's no reason to use any other word to describe myself, but I'm increasingly categorized and self-categorized as a journalist creator because somehow I have to signify that I'm independent, that I adopt some of the business models or revenue streams that content creators who aren't journalists do. It's a way that I can distinguish myself from what frankly is still like a huge contingent, especially in my context of the United Kingdom. So many journalists who are attached to staff roles in newsrooms decline to really invest much time or amplify their work on video. So sometimes people say to me, oh, like in the future, you won't have to call yourself a journalist creator, just call yourself a journalist. And there are some horrible terms that people come up with. Like a PR person once said ginfluencer, as if like journalism influencer. And I was like, have you ever heard someone call themselves that? No. So why are you saying it? You think like these ridiculous terms that you hear around the place. And I just call myself a journalist because that's what I am. And what I do is journalism. This is what journalism looks like in 2025.
Stephanie, you've also worked in mainstream newsrooms, and we both worked at CTV at one time, and you've now moved in onto YouTube. Can you talk about how YouTube supports or has evolved to support news content on its platform?
For sure. This is actually something I'm really proud of and made me feel really good about shifting from, I hate to use the word traditional, just,
The legacy media, let's call it, or
also, yeah, you know what I mean.
yeah.
It made me feel really good about transitioning because YouTube has put an emphasis and priority on news. It's why I was hired. I was hired in Canada specifically to manage the news strategy and support news partners. And it's not just about, the HR strategy and having a person, a human here helping news organizations navigate the crazy new world we find ourselves in. But we also have a number of products on YouTube. We have top news, a top news shelf. We have a breaking news shelf. And so what's interesting to see is that we are actually leaning in to our responsibility. It was never the intention. When you think back to YouTube in 2007, there wasn't the specific intention to become an important news source, but we are now. And so understanding that, YouTube is investing a lot in evolving those news products and hiring people like me.
And so you just used the word responsibility, and that brings me kind of into the next thing I want to talk about as we talk about this redefined sort of title of journalist and creators, people who maybe don't have a journalism background but find themselves in this information space. I'll bring this to Sophia. You have over 500,000 followers on TikTok. The algorithm, definitely kind of can decide what content to push, what people are responding to. Sometimes it's not always the most important informational ones. I know on my TikTok, sometimes it's a little frustrating. The things that you think are really important for people to know about are the ones that don't reach a large audience, and then the little frivolous video about something silly gets 1 million views. How do you balance that understanding what's going to go viral, what's going to do well with what's important to get to audiences? And I'll ask Johnny this question as well afterwards.
The longer you make videos, the more data you collect. With every piece of content that you put out, you get a sense of, did my existing audience like it? Did people who had never heard of me before like it? Was this something that was an excellent performer as a single video, but didn't convert many people into followers? There are so many different metrics that we can apply to content, and content creators and journalists and journalist creators will. It's quite rare you look at a video standalone. It's really you look at what your content maybe has achieved or been able to deliver for you over a period of time, and either those analytics tell you, yeah, you're doing the right thing, you're kind of getting the results that you want, or it might be saying to you, you're not quite getting this or that, and maybe there needs to be a slight gear change in what you're doing. I understand what you're saying about the appeal of this one video idea is so important to me, and I kind of feel like my audience aren't really going to care, but it's so important to me that I'm going to do it anyway. I think that every creator should indulge in stuff like that, because the worst thing that could happen is that you only make content for sort of appeasing the algorithm or appeasing an audience who maybe never actually turns up for you when you really need them, and you aren't doing anything for yourself. I think most people, when they have a content strategy, it's a bit of everything. And sometimes you hear creators saying things like 70% of my content is the bread and butter that I know people like, and then 20% might be extreme experimentation, and then 10% is the passion project that I don't care how it does, it's important to me. Everyone has their own mixture. The main thing is that you, the creator, are happy with it and that it is sustainable for you. Because the worst thing would be that you adopt a strategy that means this isn't sustainable and you burn out, or you decide it isn't for you.
Johnny, how do you weigh those two things out?
It's sort of a central tension in this creator independent algorithmic driven world, and it's one that I've approached by making it very clear that I'm not a newsroom. I'm not an institution who has an editor in chief who is using their discretion to decide what's newsworthy and then breaking news or covering events. That's a framework that we're all very familiar with. It's what's on the front page. It's what we see. It's the most important stuff, which to me also has some pretty backward incentives in terms of like, I think in that world, the algorithm isn't as much the heart of that, but there's still an algorithmic type thing that is, if it bleeds, it leads. We tend to associate news and important journalism with the most extreme, horrifying, violent issue of the day, which I think a lot of people feel tired by. They don't feel like they're learning about the world by learning about a shooting in Texas. Even if that shooting in Texas is very important, I approach journalism with this sense of curiosity and teaching. I say, what do I need to understand about the world and want to understand about the world? And naturally, as a human, as me, not as an institutional responsibility. And then how do I use responsible tactics of journalism to go inquire about that and then communicate it? And what the result is kind of an eclectic smattering of a lot of different coverages that are not by any stretch of the imagination newsy a lot of the time, but to me, they people feel, especially new generations, feel them as news because the definition of news is changing to something that teaches them about the world and feels relevant to their lives. And that's where I think there's a lot of beauty and flexibility in this independent world, where I can be curious about something and I can go chase it down. And the very act of me doing that means that it will probably do well in the system. So I guess I would say we can play the algorithm game, but there are slightly different rules and slightly different parameters that I've chosen to lean into curiosity and authenticity with a bedrock of journalistic ethics and standards as the method, but the style is what's flexible. And I think that actually does really well in the algorithm, and it's actually a boon to good journalism.
Stephanie, we just heard there kind of the different ways that journalists, whether it's independent creators online or mainstream newsrooms or traditional legacy media, might have an editorial meeting to decide what is worth talking about and sharing. YouTube is a platform where we see both of those, right? I know I can go to CBC's live on YouTube when there is a breaking presser or a news story of a shooting, and I can watch that live content. But I know I can also go to YouTube to get some analysis or conversation from an independent creator. What do you think draws the public to either of those? And do you see, one over the other, or do you see kind of both of them playing a role in informing the public when it comes to some of these conversations?
Yeah, I very much view, and I'm only speaking for YouTube here, YouTube is being complementary. And we're actually starting to see data. In fact, I had CBC as one of the partners of mine, since you bring them up, Ginella, and they've spoken about publicly how they're seeing engagement with their content on YouTube lift their engagement on their O&O. And so they're, the GEMs and the CBC Newses of the world. So I actually believe they're complementary, and it is not a zero-sum game. I think that some established thinking is, well, if they're over here, then they're not over there. And that's just not what we're seeing. I think it's really important to change that mindset. And the reality is, and like it or not, we know from the 2024 Reuters Digital News Report that 29% of Canadians only come to YouTube for news. And so for me, when I'm talking to news partners, wouldn't you rather be part of that broader conversation and engagement where a significant part of the population is only ever going to go there?
Absolutely. You raised something that was a conversation that I was having with my former employer back in 2021, and was met with some resistance. And I've seen over the years that attitude change. We're talking about CBC specifically. I mean, they now have a TikTok account that has over 1 million. I'm not even sure if it's 2 million subscribers now. And so they've shifted from this idea that we are, stealing viewers away from our TV sets or from a gem, and actually realizing they need to fish where the fish are. They need to be where the audience is, and meet them where they are. To that end, Johnny, what can these traditional outlets learn from creators like yourself about being in those spaces? And I'll bring that question to Sophia as well.
This is a really hard one. I've watched this last decade. These institutions recognize what's coming, make efforts towards putting a lot of investment, money, and talent towards getting up with these new formats and styles and audiences, and not have a ton of success. Like, it's been a very difficult thing, so I don't actually have the answer for the institutions, other than I believe that no matter what form it takes, there's going to have to be a comfort with taking the institutional brand of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, which is an eternal feeling brand that is a top-down voice, and to let the voices of individuals and the curiosity and the kind of messier, less unified reality of a human brain be a part of the process and be showcased to the audience. Because audiences, whether we like it or not, and I think there's a lot of downside to this, but audiences look at those big authoritative brand logos that used to be the bastion of truth in the fourth estate, and they feel the opposite. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's actually, especially for a lot of these institutions, that's a really scary thing for our society, but it is a reality that is happening. And so if those institutions, which do amazing work, are going to capture those audiences, they are going to have to move towards how those audiences want to see things. And that is going to mean sacrificing some old norms around how the institution speaks as a voice, and some of the standards, stylistic and otherwise. I don't know what form it takes. It's a big puzzle. I just hope they can figure it out, because it is vital that they find those new audiences.
Sophia, I'd like you to weigh in, and Johnny, you kind of touched on one of the conversations that I had, which was, if we are going to be on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever, we can't just slap on the 6 o'clock broadcast onto TikTok as a clip. We've got to speak in the language and the tone and the style of that platform. Sophia, what conversations have you had, or would you like to have with some of these newsrooms maybe that you worked in, about how they should be playing in these spaces?
It's not so much about the newsrooms that I worked in. This is what I would say to any newsroom, that a lot of the people who are decision makers in a newsroom are still finding it quite difficult to accept how the media ecosystem has changed. You do not need to persuade the video journalists and the social media journalists, who are all brilliant and have been on this digital front line as long as we have. They know things are changing. They know what has to be done, but it's often them that are not quite getting the buy-in from the senior people that they work with, who are letting them shift and be agile very quickly. So I often find that when I'm speaking to newsrooms, it's not even so much about discussing individual formats with them. It's basically nudging them into cultural change, because cultural change allows them to understand that legacy brands no longer hold monopoly in the media world that they once did. It helps them understand that where we sit in this new ecosystem, the Gutenberg parenthesis, this media theory, has become a real guiding light to the work that I do. It's really helped me understand how the way that media is shared in a digital world, it's remixed, it's collaborative. We are all distributors. it's exciting for me to be in this environment. But for anyone who enjoyed this one way direction of the news, I hold the news and I tell it to you and you receive it and that's that. There are a lot of people in senior leadership who don't want to relinquish that. And the truth, of course, that we all know is they lost it a long time ago. It's not theirs to relinquish anymore. But it's really hard. It's really hard going to sort of senior people and saying you're wrong. Like, you can't do that. So when I'm brought into places, it's often gentle cultural guidance and looking at the opportunities and the good news, the good side that comes out of this environmental change.
Stephanie, the reality is that a big factor in this conversation for newsrooms is the business, the profit model. I used to hear, and in some of my previous works, it's broadcast dollars to digital dimes. Can you talk about, is that a misguided approach in 2025? Can you talk a little bit about what possibilities there are when it comes to social media, YouTube specifically, versus traditional broadcast or print?
For sure. I think YouTube, again, is a little bit distinct here. We are sort of a unicorn. We have social media attributes, but we're a video distribution platform. We don't really fit neatly into any particular box, to be frank. And I think that's part of why we're so successful. When it comes to making money, we give creators over half of the ad revenue that's earned on their content. We also give them over half of the revenue that's earned from people who subscribe to YouTube Premium, which is also, when you think about it, incredibly unusual that we would actually hand the bulk of revenue over to creators. And besides advertising, I think in total there are 10 different ways to make money on YouTube. For example, membership. We have a lot of creators putting together paid content available only to the audience who's a member. We have, things like super thanks, super chat, to really build a business also on the relationship that you're building with the community. And so honestly, the revenue side is very much baked in to YouTube. Whereas, I think on other platforms, the relationship between, money and content isn't necessarily quite as direct. So I do think that in that way, we're distinct from the other platforms. And I would actually ask, Johnny and Sophia, the same question, because the biggest question we have is, how do you create a sustainable business?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, and actually, I want to go there to Sophia and Johnny, and maybe Sophia, I'll come to you first. This is a burning question for a lot of folks who maybe don't want to have the fight or convince their bosses, and they want to take the jump themselves, but it's a big question mark because a lot of folks are experts at news and journalism and content, but they're not entrepreneurs or business people, and they don't really know what the possibility is. Sophia, I saw you post on LinkedIn where you said that you've never felt as financially stable as you do now as a content creator, having worked in newsrooms. I think some people might be surprised to hear that sentiment and are scared about the idea of giving up, a full-time job or whatever, to do something on their own. Can you share a little bit about the logistics, the numbers, the business, the profit model, and why you feel that way?
I mean, it is an awful lot of graft. It is even my own social media profile. I had hundreds of thousands of followers when I left a staff journalism role. I was not starting from scratch when I left. And I think a lot of the journalists who've done this pivot that I have done did that. A lot of them would have raised their profile significantly whilst at a publisher, and then they go it alone. I think if you looked at a pie chart of sort of revenue streams, it would be loads of slices, sort of varying sizes. And the smart thing for me to do, honestly, at this stage would actually be to go on YouTube and benefit more deeply from the by far best revenue share option that there is in video, because the TikTok revenue share is nowhere near as good. And on Instagram Reels, I make nothing. So the thing is, how do I make money? It's through lots of different things. I do continue to work with traditional media. So I regularly make radio series and documentaries with places like BBC, Radio 4. I have a consulting company. This year I won 2 journalism prizes to build an app to help journalists and experts turn their written work into vertical video scripts like the ones that I write, so that they can amplify their expertise a bit better. I never thought that one of my revenue streams would be an app that I developed, but it's 2025 and there is AI, and there are all of these exciting things that I can do now. Last year, I had an Etsy store that did really well, that was attached to the languages content that I make and that I'm mainly known for online. So I think the most exciting thing about this is that you can be entrepreneurial in lots of diverse ways that a traditional journalism job will not have introduced you to. And also, it's like traditional journalists, you don't have to worry about the money side of your news business most of the time. And that's kind of like a good thing. There's always this sort of thing about sort of editorial independence and being a reporter. I shouldn't have had to have worried about budgets every day. But when you're a one-woman production unit, I have to be an expert on everything at my desk. I find that very fulfilling and empowering, but not everyone would like that.
Johnny, I'm sure you get this question a lot about how do you make money doing what you do, and what advice can you give to people who want to do what you do but are worried about the revenue side? And I should point out, as Sophia mentioned, in Canada, you cannot make money off of TikTok. So that's a piece as well.
Yeah.
Johnny, can you weigh in on this?
So what we're building over here is called New Press. It's sort of a budding concept that is trying to solve for this, actually. My channel was originally just me, and I monetized it through ads, both the YouTube rev share, which is a pretty small amount. It's probably 15% of our revenue. The bulk of our revenue, like unlike Sophia, we have 2 buckets. One is a small bucket called YouTube ad. The other is like the NordVPN sponsorship that you see in the middle of the video. That is our business. We are in the business of having a big commercial in the middle of our video. That's a very normal media business. The difference is that I, the journalist, am saying the words. And that's what pays for everything right now. I do agree that there's broadcast dollars and digital dimes, and that we will see a giant transition over to valuing the millions of views we get in a way that actually brings those marketing dollars over, but it's going to be some time. New Press is our way to help journalists start their own channels, and not like as a platform, but as we basically take journalists that fit our ethos and build up a business around them, so that they can feel like they are part of just like a normal outlet, but then they own their channel, they own their voice, they feel like they're a creator, but they get paid a salary. They don't have to think about taxes and things like that. And because of that, we are thinking much more about the long term. Once we have 10 creators and we're making a lot of content, we're getting a lot of views, we're making premium stuff, how do we then go out and replicate what old media networks and companies did, but in the digital space? And we don't actually know what that looks like yet. Currently, we fit into the creator economy, and we do a lot of how influencers get paid and creators of all kinds. We fit into that world, but we know we're a little bit weird and different because we're doing journalism. It's often not very brand friendly. And so in the long run, what I envision is we're going to be a big company. Right now we have 30 employees. Someday we'll have 100 employees. And some of those employees will be salespeople. And it will be much more like the new version of the traditional media business that goes out and sells big packages of ads that get placed in all of the things. And then the other thing we're doing is a subscriber funded play. This fall, we're launching New Press as a community-led platform where people can support our journalism, but also can participate in helping contribute and influence what we cover, and answer questions and expertise. And that's going to be a new revenue stream that we hope is gets us away from just being so reliant on ads, which we are right now. Yeah, so it is always changing, but I believe we're in the infancy of what will be a much more matured market as everyone wakes up to this is where the audiences are.
Sophia, as we're talking about kind of reimagining journalism and sort of breaking the mold in these entrepreneurial sort of ventures, can you talk a little bit about your app, which you mentioned, and why you wanted to do what you did?
So I've been involved a long time. I was a fellow at Brown for a time about finding ways to counter misinformation. And obviously I've specialized in my work in vertical video. And I realized when I was training journalists on how to do what I had done and training them on how they could turn their journalism into viral news explainers, when surveyed, there were two main obstacles as to why they'd been struggling to amplify their work on a platform like TikTok. And the main obstacle was time, which I think all of us can understand why it was time. And the other main obstacle was a lack of video skills. If you think about, certainly in my case in the UK, looking at journalism school formats, it's often the case that print journalists and even broadcast journalists, which is my own background, I was taught how to cut TV packages. I was not taught at uni how to cut digital. I did that all off my own back. So I really wanted to create a tool that could reduce some of this friction that journalists felt, because they need to amplify themselves as individuals online if they want their journalism to be seen. They need to be making vertical video content. I will have research out soon that I've been working on for a while on sort of the social media presence of British journalists, because UK-based journalists, because for me it's very worrying how slow we've been. So Sophiana, I called the app Sophiana because it helps people be like me. Get it? And my name is Sophia, and it's helped generate. It's only 3 months old, but it won a prize here in the UK, and it also won a grant from the International Centre for Journalists in the US. And it's already helped. It's helped people go viral. It helped a BBC journalist go viral promoting a recent documentary she made. It's generated over 4,000 video scripts at this point. It's been used in over 100 countries. I've been able to expand it so far to English, Spanish, Arabic, and French. And I would love to see more languages. And it's really exciting that hopefully I already know it's helped people make their first videos. That's all they needed. They needed a better tool.
Yeah, and I hear that issue, you know, of taking a long or complex issue and trying to whittle it down to something simple. I always think about that. I think it's Mark Twain. He says, "I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one." Like, it's harder to do simple stuff. And Johnny, that's one of the things that you do with your explainer videos, that you've been kind of known for. And I think people's attention span is so short these days. But how do you balance making sure you don't lose the nuance? That, you know, not everything can be simplified into bite-sized pieces. How do you kind of figure out what you're going to keep, what you're going to include, still making it digestible without losing some of the complexities or nuances?
Yeah, I mean, that's the deep existential question for my craft, which is taking really complicated stuff with a lot of theoretical and historical underpinnings. You know, my background's in academia. Like, I studied peace and conflict resolution and international relations in my master's, and like that was taking all of that and then making 2-3 million people want to watch it is the challenge. And the responsibility and the ethics is to do that in a way that does not mislead, oversimplify, or misrepresent. That it's there's no clean answer to that, other than, number one, there's some hope, which is my videos get longer and longer every year. They get more and more in depth, and people just keep coming back. I think we published an hour-long video. Like, if you go on my channel, the last 5 videos are, I think, all over 40 minutes. An hour and 7 minutes was our last one. They just keep getting longer. And that's me just pulling on this thread to see how deep I can go and bring the audience along with me. Now, first off, making that size of a video is a very complicated thing. We have an amazing team that can like bring it all together. But from a, how do you engage people on an algorithmic internet where they could be watching anything else and it's all right there, and like it's just right, it's one click away, and I'm sitting there telling them about the fractured civil war in the DRC, and I'm like, watch this instead. The answer is you, and this again, it comes back to signaling a sense of natural curiosity to the audience. I really believe that this is a powerful technique. It's something that can be used and abused in the wrong way, and it is often with information on the internet because no one's gatekeeping it. But for good faith journalists, demonstrating that you're a person and that you're not just the voice of God, that you're a person who has a question, and then showing the audience that you're just a person on, you know, like talking to people and Googling things and figuring it out yourself, that allows the audience to feel like they're discovering with you. And they are, in a sense. And that I believe that is the secret to getting someone to watch, you know, a 40-minute video about the DRC, is saying, this is actually really interesting. Let me show you why I'm curious about it, and let me show you how I learned about it. And that tone, it's a tonal thing, it's a stylistic thing. So, and then of course you got to make it entertaining, you got to make it, and I think that's an interesting challenge that again can go too far if not without some boundaries. But ultimately the internet is this cutthroat market of attention that requires us to make our stuff better, more relatable, and it's really honed in this style that I think really works, and it allows us to do journalism that I'm really proud of. Again, I want to be very clear. There's pitfalls in this. There are bad incentives in this. There's a force that pulls me and all of us towards more sensational, more reductionist, more one-sided approaches to things. And to resist that requires some really firm red lines. And those are lines that I've had to figure out over time. But the beautiful thing is the audience is there to be like, oh, you're a human. Like I'm going to keep going along with you. I can apologize very easily. I can make corrections when I need to. And people are like, all right, there's a good faith person that I trust. That kind of trust, I think, is vital in a world where most content on YouTube will be synthetic in terms of like, it'll be created by AI. We won't be able to know if it's real or not. Trust in a human being who's out there doing journalism is going to be vital in this new world, and that's what we're trying to cultivate in our journalism.
You just mentioned the pitfalls and the downsides, and that is one of the things, is that, you know, this sort of wild west of social media that on one hand can kind of democratize news and journalism, also means that anyone can pick up a microphone and use it to amplify. Stephanie, I'd like you to weigh in on that. You know, as a platform where, you know, anyone can upload, and you know, it's kind of a two-way street, right? It's an educated audience that needs to understand and maybe be a little bit critical, but then there's also the responsibility on the other side. Can you maybe weigh in on that?
For sure. We think long and hard about this. I think, again, we work a little differently than maybe some of the other platforms. What's hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around is how personalized YouTube is. So your YouTube is different than my YouTube. And it is truly based on what you're watching, what you're interested in. But also, we do think about high quality content. There are a number of signals we look for in terms of authority, trustworthiness. And it isn't just machines, it's also humans who look at these things. I think that, you know, one example, and this may illustrate sort of in a practical way how we manage sensitive material. During the early days of the Gaza conflict, we had a lot of news organizations obviously uploading a lot of important news video. And in some of those cases, we were applying an age restriction. And, you know, for journalists who've worked in the more traditional system, the question for me was, well, why are you applying this rule? It's on broadcast. It's, you know, it works there. We're conforming to all of those rules. And I think that the significant difference on YouTube is that we're an open platform. So we make it a priority that when someone comes to YouTube, there's nothing shocking or graphic that they encounter. We take that responsibility very seriously. And so community guidelines that we have around violent or graphic content, in the case of news, we think about there's 4 different categories. We have what we call EDSA. So I'm just going to look at it here: educational, documentary, scientific, or artistic purpose. Sometimes you do have important content that may be a little more graphic or sensitive, but in the case of news, sometimes we allow it on the platform, but sometimes we'll age gate it. Sometimes we'll also put up a graphic advisory, and we'll even make sure that if a video has that graphic advisory, it doesn't autoplay, for example, in shorts. And so are we perfect? No. But I think the point here is that we have teams who think about this all day long. How do we evolve our policies to walk this line between this is really important information, but may also be a little more graphic for the community, but produced by a news organization. And I expect that we're going to continue to evolve our strategy as we go. Touching on AI really quickly, last week we just announced that we're launching a likeness, AI likeness ID. So essentially, we are proactively going to provide a tool people can use to manage their own likeness and its use as part of AI. So we are, again, trying to contemplate how do we exist and live as a responsible platform in this ever-changing environment.
I'm glad to hear that, because it's a constant fear of mine. Is there is so much of my image online for as a source for it to be used and altered in nefarious ways. Sophia, just really quickly, do you worry about that kind of that double-edged sword of anyone being able to use these platforms? And do you want to see more parameters around these, like what we've just heard?
Even what you just described, part of the reason that I wanted to make Sofiana, because I very cynically just thought, you know what, someone else is going to try and take all of my hard work and all of my scripts over the years and, use that without my permission or licensing or anything for me. And I was like, actually, I can take this into my own hands. All of my work is my proprietary data that, I, if I want to, can consent to myself using it. And I have found AI deepfakes of me on TikTok. I have everything that you can imagine happens in the AI apocalypse has happened to me. I've had weird AI biographies generated of me and sold on Amazon. Everything has happened. And I think I worry about I'm always frustrated by the outcome that happens from all of these things, which is if I find a deep fake of me, I report it, it probably does get taken down. Like, what is in place to stop that person just doing it again? It's actually that's the biggest problem for me. It's not simply the removal of the content, because I normally do get it removed. It's the impunity that a lot of individuals can move forward on the internet with. And I always prefer to use that term over anonymity, because anonymity, there are scenarios in which that has been very, very helpful and good on the internet. It's not always bad. And I feel like a lot of conversations always posit anonymity as bad, but it's actually impunity of the bad guys is the problem here. They have impunity.
We've raised the topic of AI, and often it's used as a bad word, but I'm interested, just very quickly before we jump into the audience Q&A, because it can be used as a tool. Sophia, you mentioned using it to build your app, and Johnny, I know you also have been using AI in your work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's for someone whose job is to synthesize a lot of information and to get facts right. Large language models are a game-changing tool, and it's taken me a while to figure out where they are not a great tool, which is just going in and asking questions. Like using it as Google on steroids has a lot of pitfalls. But there are such more sophisticated ways that we've started to use it. A great example of this is for every story, we gather all of our primary source. Like right now, we're doing this big thing on the history of Taiwan, the Cold War in Asia. We gathered all of the transcripts of Kissinger's visit to China in 1971, Nixon's. We gathered all of these books, really rigorous academic books, articles, all of the declassified documents. We put those into our own model using Notebook LLM, which is free and open for everyone. You can input all of those text resources and websites and whatever you want. And then that is now your language model. It's not just pulling from around the wherever. It's pulling only from that data, that source information. And then you can start to crack into that information in a way that it feels like magic to me. I can ask for, hey, what are examples of specific blah, 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 blah. And it will go fish it out of thousands and thousands of pages. It will go fish it out and it won't, I don't have to trust it. It will give me a footnote on page 473. This is what it says. And then I jump to page 473 and now I'm reading that part of the book. So between that and deep research on ChatGPT, I'm able to access a huge amount of information that pulls primary source and authoritative information right to my doorstep exactly when I need it. And then I can report based on that. I don't ever rely on AI to do the reporting for me or to be the fact checker or anything like that. I rely on it to be the comber of the entire internet / the sources I've given it to then bring those sources right to me in an instantaneous way. And it has allowed us to find little, in this Kissinger transcript, I'm finding all these little tidbits that have never been reported before because they're like down, pages and pages in. And I'm uncovering them because I have this tool that's going to read everything and know exactly what I'm looking for. So that's the most powerful, most actionable way that we're already using it. There's a whole visual production side of things that is a little more touchy and a little bit more, we're finding our voice in that in terms of generative imagery. And that one we don't employ. We do tests with it and we experiment with it because we don't want to be like left behind. But I'm still making up my mind on how we're going to employ generative imagery in our production while making journalistic work. And so that's sort of on the back burner. But the large language model for research and reporting is an incredible tool.
Okay, we've got just under 10 minutes left and we have a lot of questions from the audience. So appreciate all the engagement online. I think a lot of young journalists who are kind of entering a new media landscape. So I'll take this question from Phelan. Strong in-depth journalism takes a long time and resources to develop, and making it hard to break out independently while still being able to financially support yourself. If you were starting from zero today, what would you do first to build something sustainable? I'm not sure if Johnny or Sophia or even Stephanie have an immediate thought.
I've got a quick thought, which is I agree that in-depth journalism takes all those resources. And when you're independent, at first you can't do that. But start small. You can do acts of journalism in a less resource intensive way by staying small and shorter and more narrow and signaling your values and your editorial voice and finding that voice as you build a business. But it's not easy and it's not quick. What I did is, if you go back and watch my videos when I first was independent, they're a little thinner, they're smaller. But with time, as we've built this thing, I now could do these hour-long videos with a team of people, and like we can now do the journalism I always hope for, and we're going to continue to push it. But you got to start somewhere, and there's nothing wrong with starting small to find that voice.
This is a question I think maybe for Stephanie. Jess asks, is there a market for long-form video reporting in local news, for example, doing video on municipal issues, or do you need a broader audience for it to be sustainable?
I love that question for two reasons. First, trying to identify the genres or topics that do well on YouTube is futile because everything can do well. It does come down to what Johnny and Sophia have spoken about, which is what are you passionate about? because audiences, in particular, I would argue younger audiences, want authenticity, and that will shine through when you create content that you're passionate about. So if you're passionate about municipal issues, absolutely focus on that. To the point of long form, I do think that, again, Johnny makes a good point. Start small. You don't need a camera crew. You don't need a producer. That's the beautiful thing and the hard thing. You can just go out and start making stuff. And that's what I would advise you to do. I would also say that I think there's a bit of a myth when it comes to YouTube that it's primarily short form.
Hmm.
Short form is important because we know that Gen Z specifically uses it to sample content and then decide what they're going to watch more of. It's a great sampling tool. But let me tell you something. When I look at all of my news partners, documentaries do incredibly well. If something is good quality and compelling, and my journalism prof told me this once, people will listen for however long it takes for you to tell the story. Like there is no, again, the idea that in particular young people have a short attention span. I've watched my kids watch 4 and 5 hour long videos on YouTube. So I don't think that's necessarily true. All of that to say, do what you feel is important to you. And that authenticity will definitely come through.
Rick asks, the press used to operate on the assumption that everyone needs an editor to double check our work, push us a little deeper. How do you feel about the role of editors today, especially as an independent creator? Maybe Sophia, I'll bring that question to you.
I think what you just described is the reason why I haven't sort of totally abandoned working with traditional media. The first thing I started missing when I went independent was learning from people who'd been in the industry way longer than me, and like sitting next to a really experienced journalist who, if I was having a problem one day, to just talk to them about it. And like what Johnny is building is amazing, because this is the beginning of infrastructure in the creator economy, which is the next stage that will develop in this world. Creators will no longer be sort of archipelagos of individuals doing their own thing, but there'll be far more backing and support, and we'll move forward a lot more quickly with infrastructure like that. I think what I would sort of earlier on, if I really needed editor support, I think some things we are seeing are creators informally building infrastructure. You'll see individuals even just establish WhatsApp groups and talk through ideas to each other. You see informal support networks being established in that way. But the reality is a lot of us are our own editors. That simply is the case. And you have to get used to being a self-starter and an independent thinker, and frankly, being a risk taker. This is not a career path for the risk averse.
Nonso asks, have you ever found difficulty or pushback sharing your work authentically with moderation tools that exist on your platforms? I mean, we heard Stephanie talk about, maybe limitations around videos from Gaza. We hear people talking about shadow banning on, Instagram or TikTok, and whether it's perceived or real. Have you ever felt you had to change or modulate your work in some way as a result? Johnny, maybe I'll bring that question to you.
So I don't know the answer to this question, because I've only ever been on the front lines of the internet when I did journalism. Vox was a sort of internet first play. So a lot of my incentives and approaches are molded by that interplay, that very real-time interplay with the audience. We're launching New Press in November, which is going to be a space away from the norms and style of discourse on the open internet, which is often an attention-grabbing game. It rewards provocative comments, polarizing comments. It is not a great place for good faith, deep, nuanced conversation. New Press is going to be that. It's going to be a community-focused platform where there are very clear rules and norms that reward curiosity, good faith discourse, contribution to the journalism. And my hope is that as that becomes a bigger slice of our business pie, meaning that becomes the the incentive is to make for the new press community, I will be able to see clearly just how much the algorithmic comments driven internet has shaped my decisions, because I think there's a lot of subconscious decision making that I don't actually see very clearly. We have very clear guardrails, and I feel good about them, but I think there's going to be nuances when I'm out of that soup, and I can start to build journalism in a place that is where the audience is good faith. We'll see. I don't know, but I know it has had an effect on me. The algorithm is a powerful force, and again, those incentives aren't always good. But I guess I would say, just for the record, that like we have a commitment to truth, clarity, nuance, factual accuracy that drives everything. And so as long as that's good, I feel generally good. But I think there's some nuances in how what I say and don't say that will change when I'm not on the front lines as much.
Mm. We could probably continue this conversation for another hour, and it has been such a great discussion on such an important topic that is still, changing, evolving. We are building it. We are actively, whether as consumers or creators, actively a part of what the future of journalism will look like in the digital space. I want to thank my panelists, Johnny Harris, Sophia Smith-Gaylor, and Stephanie Wilson-Chapin, for taking the time today to be part of this conversation, for taking my questions. Thank you to the audience for your Q&A, and apologies that we couldn't get to all of them. But I know all of you are chronically online, so I'm sure if anyone really has any burning questions, they can find some ways to reach out you. Thank you so much to CJF for putting this panel together, and thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
you.
See ya.